Hello and welcome back to the Undercut podcast. We are back to preview the eighth race of the year, the Austrian Grand Prix. See, the calendar sounds more sensical now that
I
we've,
was just thinking that.
yeah, eighth race of the year, Austrian Grand Prix sounds about right. I'm your host, Jesse Billington, and joining me once again is none other than Mr. Thiemo Albers Daly. How are you?
Surprisingly refreshed and ready to get back into the Formula One action.
Is it not like 49 degrees where you are, as it is here in central southern England?
Which is why it's surprising that I'm feeling refreshed. So
Ah,
I'm taking the positives where I can.
reasonable answer. Yeah. It's hot, sticky, sweaty, and just uncomfortable in general at the moment for me. But haven't even checked if it's going to be this hot in Austria. Let's have a quick look if the weather's going to carry on there. AccuWeather. Let's just chuck in Spielberg and see what it gives me. Spielberg, Austria. Uh, Put in Red Bull Ring and see what comes up. Red Bull Ring, Styria, Austria. They've got the exact location. This is loading. They currently have an orange warning in place for extreme high temperatures, and
And that's not just because of all the Dutch fans in attendance.
no, there is going to be more orange coming almost certainly. Thursday, 32 degrees.
McLaren fans.
Yeah, Friday 33 degrees, Saturday 35 degrees, sunny and hot. Caution advised if doing strenuous activities outside. And then Sunday, hot with sun, some clouds, 35 degrees Celsius. Caution still advised if outside for extended periods of time. The real
We may
feel
get our
is
closest repeat of Ayrton Senna struggling to get out of the car at Brazil at this rate.
mm, it's going to be drivers passing out, pushing their car from heat sort of thing. 39 degrees is going to be the real feel. So if you are a Dutch fan heading to the Red Bull Ring this weekend, remember to stay hydrated and remember that Heineken does not count as hydration. But anyway, I'm sure they'll remind people of that at the Grand Prix. The important news, however, as we kick off this week's podcast, is that Haas has been testing McLaren reserve driver Leonardo Fornaroli in the VF25 at Jerez. This is over the 17th, 18th of June, with Rio Hirakawa in attendance. Rio is one of their regular test reserve and development drivers, but Leo is more tightly associated with the McLaren program. So it's interesting that he's been plopped into the Haas. He was also very quick in McLaren in Spain in FP1.
This is quite interesting because he's also been picked recently to maybe fill in third seat at Arrow McLaren in IndyCar next year. But then he's also had some rumblings around their endurance racing program. So he's doing what most of the drivers in a similar position to his have not been able to so far, which actually translated test and reserve driver seats into something more substantial, be it in Formula One or somewhere else. And he's not limiting himself to simply one of those options. He is exploring every possible avenue. And we've seen this with F2 champions from the past, with Theo Share and I'm struggling to think of the other one off the top of my head now that it immediately comes to mind, but as a prime example of they come along, Felipe Drogovic, that was who I was thinking of, and they are around, but they don't really do too much. We see this with Festi. He wasn't a champion, but he was very much up there. Hasn't really been able to turn it into anything since then for one reason or another. Fornaroli doesn't seem to want to wait, regardless. It's like, if I'm not going to be in the Haas next year, stick me in the Arrow McLaren. If I'm not going to be in that, stick me in let me do something that is more than just test sessions. And if they were looking for a replacement for him, Behrman would be in his third season. Fornaroli's a strong rookie. It's sort of the next one up from what they did back in 2021 with the two rookies there, so it's not the worst idea in the world. Potentially more stable management. You're also not really losing too much if you're Haas at the moment, risk wise, because you're not in a position of really building and sustaining what you build in the early part of that season. We talked about that last time, right? They keep slipping down. They got to do something. I'd be interested to see if this is what they do.
Yeah, there's interesting speculation on sort of what Fornaroli could do if he moves up to Haas in a full-time seat. Which driver does he push out? And obviously, a lot of this sort of maybe early on this year, we might have said that it would be Behrman that's moving up to Ferrari to replace Hamilton. But now we look at the fact that Leclerc's got that long contract. Hamilton has now found his form, found his feet at the team with aplomb to really shorten it. Behrman isn't going to Ferrari for another 2 years, I think, at this point, for certain,
Least.
at least. So if you're Haas, you're going to cling on to Ollie Behrman as best you can because he is a feisty and competent driver. And Ocon might want to start looking elsewhere, I think is the fair thing. This is just one test session. I think it's obviously very early to start jumping to conclusions, but I mean, Haas have been testing Rio Hirakawa in that
It's
car for
just not a team
ages.
you always see associated with McLaren drivers. That's why
Mhm.
it's interesting. If it was just Rio, fine, no problem. If they'd stuck, forget the name of the driver in F1
Jack
Academy in
Doohan.
there for whatever reason, or Jack Doohan, yeah, that would have made sense as well. But it's because it's a McLaren driver that you go,
Yeah.
interesting.
It's someone with a very strong backing. If you look at Fornaroli kart and everything, this is a guy that is so imbued in motorsport and has such tight links to just motorsport in its generalist, broadest term. There's gonna be a way, I think. And yeah, I think there's this sort of drive
Be
to
nice
have
to see an
different.
F2 champion who didn't have the seat at the table forcing his way in
Mm,
somewhere for
yeah.
because we just don't see it.
Yeah, we haven't really seen sort of the F2 champions sort of making their way up for a little while now. It's one of those awkward things. So it's going to be useful to see sort of what happens. It's one to keep an eye on. Hirakawa, however, will be out in the car in FP1 in Austria. Obviously, he needs to sort of tie the car back to the development work he's doing back at the factory alongside Jack Doohan, who is also their test and reserve driver. Luke Browning will also try again to go out in the Williams for FP1. We reckon that he's sort of going to slowly build up his time in FP1, sort of turn by turn, isn't it? So Silverstone will get to
I'm
maybe
just thinking
turn
the
three,
heat,
turn
the
four.
Williams, the problem they had last year. I'm not going to trust that just yet.
Luke Browned all over when the car catches fire, more like. And then Dino Beganovic is back out in the Ferrari too. I assume he'll be replacing Charles Leclerc because he replaced Lewis in Spain. So I assume they're going to sort of alternate. Otherwise, it seems unfair making Lewis miss two FP1s back to back. However, didn't seem to
Or
face
that's the
any
new,
fans.
or that's the new method of success. You miss FP1, you win the race.
Yeah,
Well,
you
I
have to
don't
just
care how it works as long as they keep doing it.
Yeah, you keep Hamilton super motivated by taking away his FP1 sessions. So you just
Hmm.
keep putting Beganovic out in FP1 in his seat all the time, apart from the two where you have to put him in for Leclerc. Anyway, speaking of Lewis Hamilton, he's called out the FIA and F1 over karting costs. The direct quote is I know someone that has a kid who is 8 years old that is spending over $1 million a year. Of course, it's more expensive today, but when I started, I remember my dad spent 20,000 in the first year, and that was like remortgaging the house, maxing out the credit cards. I just think today it's highly unlikely, if not impossible, for someone from a normal background to be able to make it to a place to compete with those that are spending 1 million. It shouldn't be allowed. When you get through the other categories, it's more and more expensive. Rather than who's got the most talent comes through, it's the families with the most money that create the options for the privileged kids. And unfortunately, for the short term, that's what you're going to see over the next several decades until that changes. And that's down to the FIA and Formula One. They actually need to make those changes. And he does have a very interesting point here. Lando Norris was the last guy to really come in from a sort of slightly different route where he did Ginetta Juniors, which was a closed cockpit GT sports car racing series that ran as a feeder to essentially the BTCC. That's the last drive we saw that sort of had anything different than sort of karting regional F3, F2, F1. And
But also, he wasn't coming from an underprivileged background
no,
either. He had the funds to help get him there, which you clearly need these days. And it's something we've talked about. We talk about it with any time we mention any kind of the feeder series, and it's such a shame that we don't see more opportunities. You look at Abby Pulling as the prime example of that in recent times, and we keep wondering why is she not getting that F3 seat when she's shown time and again she's got more than what it takes, and it comes back to this every single time. Um, what difference this makes, I don't know. Obviously, he's got his foundation that he's heavily working on in the background when he's not at races too to try and help level the playing field. But hopefully, something comes of it, or at least you get some kind of vanilla statement from someone at F1 or the FIA, and hopefully, someone asks some follow up questions in a press conference sometime soon to keep the attention on it. Because if we base it purely off the people with the most amount of money coming in, there's two very obvious examples that I don't even need to name that everyone will guess over the last decade that go, doesn't guarantee much of anything, does it?
yeah. Yeah, I don't think we really need to bother naming them. It's quite obvious the fact that one of them's
It's
still in the
obvious.
sport and his dad has now bought him an entire team. I mean, the other guy's dad almost bought him an entire team as well. So, uh,
Mm.
yeah, Lewis has a very sound point here. The flaw is that motorsport is just generally very expensive, and I don't want to undermine his point, but I'm not sure when was Lewis in go-karts. Let's have a quick look.
It's been what, late 90s, early 2000s.
1998. So what was £20,000 in 1998 worth now? Inflation calculator, Bank of England inflation calculator, and we're looking at £20,000 in 1998, let's say, cost this year. Yeah, £40,000 this year, which I'm not going to say is a reasonable amount of money to spend on your child to enjoy some sports. However, it's not £1 million either. It's a long way short.
No, but you think if that's Lewis as well, coming from the perspective of not having the best kit available,
Mm,
and we talk about Esteban O'Connor, he had the same sort of thing of he's having to go rifling through and use discarded tires from other drivers who do spend that kind of money. It's 40,000 is the minimum just to be there. That doesn't necessarily mean anything other than that. That's just to be at the track with all the basics. If you want anything more than that, obviously the costs get quite a bit, and obviously it's a very easy, slippery slope to get up to that million. So yeah, 40 grand is a starting point. It's one of those things where it's oh, that seems like a good deal, and then you realize all the extra stuff that you have to go in for that and what it doesn't include, and you go, yeah, so it's probably more likely this. But then if you're going to spend that, you might as well get the rest and keep going and keep going and keep going.
well, let's put it this way. From the FIA karting website, essentially it says that competing in top tier FIA karting costs anywhere from 100 to £250,000 a year. Um,
Case in point,
yeah, so we're talking more than double essentially the
and that
cost
and, that, and that's the basics at the
of inflation.
grassroots level.
Yeah.
Before you even get to FRECA, Formula 3, and beyond.
Yeah, and it's not like in karting, there's a lot of opportunity to sort of have sponsorship and sort of backing to it because there isn't the big global coverage. There aren't going to be brands and companies that want to be attaching money and names to things where no one's, dare I say, no one's watching karting.
Mm.
It's not on the Sky feed. It's not
Well,
on
it's the
the
thing.
one
It
feed.
comes back to the whole. It's more of a thing where you're having to build a relationship and you're having to be less of a racing driver and more of a marketing person because that's the only way you'll be able to convince any of the people to sponsor you is because of what you can bring to them, and they won't mind if you then slap their branding all across the card because they go, well, you're doing the job for me on Monday to Friday. I don't care what you get up to on the weekend or how you do.
Yeah, so the FIA does have an arrive and drive series, but obviously that's going to be at the very, very early end of things. And that has the Arrive and Drive World Cup. They list it as being €14,850, which includes a race ready cart delivered to each venue, slick tires, fuel, and a paddock tent. But that doesn't include sort of probably mechanics on top of it. That doesn't include your race suits, your licenses, your helmets. You need a hand
Travel
sanitizer,
costs,
gloves, shoes, your own personal travel costs. And then to get into the CIK FIA tier costs it's listed here from sort of people who've competed in it as saying it is between that sort of 100 to £250,000 a season, with some drivers spending £1 million on it. And I mean, even then, accounting for exchange rate, you're still looking at sort of north of £500,000 in the UK. A competitive chassis for that series reportedly costs a chassis and engine package, sorry, reportedly costs between 15 and €25,000. So you've already blown nearly half of the inflation-based budget that Lewis Hamilton had. It's a very sound point he makes, and it is just one of those expensive things. And don't even get started on the costs of FI, F3 and F2. Max Esterson was
mm,
famous for saying when he left it and joined sports car racing, he said F2 was pot luck whether or not you could afford to buy the good engine for your car. And he said it was pot luck as whether you got one in the first place, but it always seemed to be certain people that ended up with the better engines. And that's supposed to be a spec-based series. Everyone's running the same engine in those cars, but some of them might not have been
more
sort of
Animal Farm.
yeah. All engines are equal, but some are more equal than others. I mean, you've only got to go to a rental karting place just to find out how badly ragged some of those cars and engines are, and realize that some karts are quicker than others. Anyway, on more upbeat and funny notes, anyone who hasn't seen it yet really ought to go and find the footage online. It's all across social media from the NASCAR round at was it Pocono Air Base or something out in the western coast of America.
San Diego.
Yep, where they hosted their sort of their 250th anniversary of America celebratory NASCAR Cup round with Kevin Magnussen featuring as essentially a one-off
With
driver.
another Dane giving it to an American, which is quite
Yes.
amusing.
Yeah. So this was he was essentially getting hustled by Gregson the entire way sort of through this race and eventually just defends
Very
his line.
restrained, I thought,
Yeah. For
considering it
Magnussen.
being Magnussen.
Yeah. But just
Um,
eventually sort of defends his line and Gregson sort of pit maneuvers himself across Magnussen's bonnet and then goes and confronts the Dane after the Grand Prix. And Kevin had
doesn't
some
go well
very
for him.
no, Kevin had some very hurt
He had a
words
clear
for him.
message,
Yeah. Most of the words involved in it were 4 letters long, um, then followed by
and
three letter
indicated
words.
the direction in which he wished he would go.
Yeah,
Um,
he very strongly
who, who,
incentivized the other driver to
whoever
phone.
whoever edited the footage that they put together, the whole thing on NASCAR side of it, did a very nice job because you had essentially the NASCAR driver Gregson's racing engineer telling him, "Be smart with him, be smart with him," and then about 2 seconds later, Magnussen's engineer coming and going, "As you can see, he's not one of the smart ones in the field." You just go, "Ah, you couldn't write it better if you tried." Then obviously, like you say, Magnussen just takes it into his own hand to go, right, that's enough of you now, you're getting in the way. Oop, gone.
Mm.
There
I
we
think
go.
the phrase they used was he
Sorted.
got chipped at the shipyard,
And
wasn't it?
very in keeping with the NASCAR. Yeah, yes, which I thought, again, whoever came up with that, very nicely done. I just thought Magnussen's just keeping up with what you kind of get away with in NASCAR. You're lucky you won on an oval. Can you imagine what he would have done to if you tried this there? It's quite amusing that Magnussen's having to teach aggressive driving in NASCAR to an American. There we go. Good fun.
I say give Magnussen a seat for the entire season. It was also, if you've seen Talladega Nights, you'll be familiar with the
Hmm.
confrontation between Ricky Bobby and Jean Girard, and the similarities are very amusing. I did find a meme of that and send it to Haas Chap as well, who remains a big KMag fan. Meanwhile, looking closer to this weekend, there are some updates for Austria when it comes to a couple of the cars. Already, we know that McLaren will debut an upside-down rear wing, which I assume is going to be the sort of Macarena kebab on a spit style one.
Rotisserie chicken.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that Ferrari and Red Bull run, and Cadillac will also be bringing some upgrades to Austria. Considering they seem to struggle with most everything at the moment, I think some upgrades will be welcome. Considering it's going to be hot, one hopes that it's going to be cooling package related as well.
I'm just interested to see what those upgrades do in particular, because obviously we don't. I mean, this must we have high hopes for them for the season, just because they are starting from scratch. But when you look at Aston Martin, and then you look at how close Cadillac have come points already, I just want to see how that battle goes on for the rest of the season. That's going to be one that's fun to watch, as well as the fact that they've got so many drivers in their development and test program. You know, you look at Herta as the prime example of that. They had him out last time in Spain in FP1, but they've got endurance drivers in there as well. They've got former F1 drivers helping them out with things as well. So to see what kind of impact that those developments will have, even if they're not immediately apparent, would be quite interesting.
Hmm. Um, Interestingly, they have branded it as a substantial upgrade package as well, which I think is going to be really
They've
important.
kidnapped Adrian Newey.
Maybe we'll see what happens, but yeah, there's new side pods, a new floor, a significant amount of work that will hopefully continue their trajectory of steadily catching up to the midfield. So that will be interesting.
I'm hoping as well, they've got quite a cool looking livery in terms of temperature. Hopefully that translates as well.
Yeah, certainly the whiter side of the car will be a bit lighter. It will just get very hot on one side and it will sort of awkwardly expand.
Mm.
But also thinking about it, no,
It'll
it
look
will
like a
sort of
weird Goldfinger tribute where it just has the spiky bits coming out of the tires, except it's in the side pod and just bashes the cars out of the way when they try getting past.
that might be a way of doing it. We'll see how it goes. But yes, plenty of upgrades to look forward to, and I'm sure more will get announced in due course. Which brings us nicely to our predictions. And Timo, we'll start with your pole position prediction, please.
Purely because it's the Red Bull Ring, purely because of who the driver in question is. I'm going to say Max Verstappen. I don't necessarily think he'll convert the pole position into podium or a race win, but I could just see him somehow getting a pole position out of this. It just seems like the kind of thing he would do.
Yeah, I think as the teams better understand and develop power deployment as well, and especially because there's some big braking zones around Austria, it's not like the car's going to be running out of electricity getting into some sections. We're not going to see super clipping. It means that he can drive that car to the absolute limits of what it can do. And we'll get would have been like a was it his qualifying run in Japan last year that was that phenomenal one
Mm.
that pulls it out of nowhere. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something very similar to that, where it's just sort of he cooks for absolutely one lap and just flies. But again,
And
we've got
still
that
Max Verstappen.
yeah, we've got that huge braking zone to turn three. We've got a big braking zone to turn four. We've got a big braking zone to turn one as well, which means that on a flying lap, the car will have sort of a full battery pack of juice. There's not a lot of deployment spaces as well because there's a lot of curved sections. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see cars sort of running very fast, similar to how they did in Barcelona, where we got to finally a proper circuit where they weren't sort of running out of electricity. But I feel that Lewis Hamilton, now that he understands the car, now that he's got the Ferrari under him, now he's got brakes that he likes and brakes that he seems to be able to keep cool and in the window as well, especially on a hot weekend in Austria, he could be on form, especially considering he's going to be on a high coming off the back of that Spain win and someone in my neighboring house drilling. Um, he's one of those drivers that works well when he's so incredibly self-motivated and focused, and he's able to build on that momentum. I think we're going to see sort of the start of this renewed Lewis really coming to the fore this weekend, and I think that echoes when I get to my podium predictions as well.
Honestly, I've left him out of some of where I might have liked to have put him in my predictions purely because I'm just trying to not jump the gun too much yet. But I don't mind other people doing it for me. So I'm not going to complain if he does get on board either.
Yeah. But when it comes to the podium, you've got Mercedes looking still fairly strong, let's say.
Yeah, I think just purely for an interesting bit of championship battling, let's get George back up there. He wins the race. So Lewis is close behind in second, and Kimi he still gets some points on the board, but it's not as many as he would like in third. So we've got Russell, Hamilton, and Antonelli on the podium in that order.
Hmm. It's yeah, a good spread that should offer us a very competitive race, especially if it's those three fighting away at the front. I've gone for a bit more Ferrari strength this weekend. Again, I think
Also,
Mercedes,
not a complaint on my end.
no. I think one of the things I'm wary of is the fact that there is possibly going to be a rule change around Mercedes' serrated rear diffuser. They've got a couple of uniquely designed rear diffuser flaps that may fall foul of some checks by the FIA coming up. And if they have to implement a different design this weekend, or if they have to bring something alternative to sort of negate that, it might hamper their performance ability. So I sort of want to err more towards Ferrari sort of gathering a bit of steam this weekend. Lewis Hamilton on the top step of the rostrum, second week in a row, Charles Leclerc behind him, and then George Russell in third.
I won't say no to it. I'm definitely not foolish enough to say no to it. The championship, nothing else.
Oh yeah, the championship it would be very interesting because that would also start to bring Charles Leclerc back into the fight as well in that sort of top four,
Mm.
which would be really interesting to see.
And helps my overall predictions of somehow getting Charles into second and Kimi down in sixth. I need to make
Yes.
that happen somehow.
Yeah, we need Isaac Hadjar to really buck his ideas up and start sort of shoving a sort of a bit of a drift in between Kimi and the rest of the field.
It's right.
Anyway,
He's going to win Zandvoort. It's fine.
he goes well around there. Fastest lap, meanwhile, you've gone for what I want to say is a fairly obvious contender.
Again, purely just for I want a point, and it seems like he could do it. George Russell. He won't get a point for it, but I might.
Hmm, not too bad. Um, I've gone for Lewis Hamilton. Again, I've predicted him for pole and the win. Have this sneaking
It
suspicion.
makes sense. I mean, how many what do they call it? It's not
Grand
slam
Slam.
dunks, but grand slams does he have already? So why not have another one?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that he'll be in the front, he'll be able to control the race to his own pace. He'll be able to really sort of
start locking in those laps and just go
yeah,
for it. Why
just
not?
start pounding them in. Especially if he's got the communication with his team to keep him on the boil
Mm.
with tires, on the boil with strategy, in the open air where that car runs so nicely when it's in the clean air. You've only got to look at how well it was racing up to the back of the lead pack in Spain to realize in fresh air that Ferrari is glued to the track. And Lewis can just be on it. And I think if he's able to lead from the opening lap of the
It's his
race,
Mercedes from 2020 painted in red.
yes, yeah, what he's done is he's photocopied the W11 and just taken it into Photoshop and just changed a couple of hues. Um,
Good for
Meanwhile,
Racing Point.
yeah, it did for them. Only cost them like 25,000 euros as well, if I remember correctly. It was like some absurdly small penalty for Racing Point doing that. Anyway, wild prediction, and we both seem to be fumbling around the Milton Keynes paddocks when we're picking these. I'll let you start.
Both of these can happen for us, so it's good. They've just been on such a strong form lately. I don't think it's too outlandish, but just wild enough to say both Racing Bulls finish in the top five, which crucially doesn't have to impact my podium.
Hmm. Which is interesting. I think it'd be really spicy if we saw them do that because again, what it does for that midfield battle when it comes to sort of the likes of Haas that are up there as well, it's going to start putting a lot of
Puts the pressure
pressure.
on Alpine as well, which I think
Yeah,
it stops them running away too much with it.
yeah, it keeps them honest. For me, I've got a Racing Bull laps a Red Bull. I predicted this a while back. I can't quite remember what the circumstances were that led to me making this
I think this was
prediction.
just pre-season predictions. We were just talking, and you just went, "Fuck it."
Yeah, I think it was the fact that we were looking at sort of like the competence of Lawson, and possibly early on we saw how quick Lindblad was looking, and the fact that we still had a bit of doubt
Mm.
around Hadjar in that sort of second
And
seat,
Red Bull
and Red Bull in general,
generally.
who didn't look great. If it's a hot weekend, I feel that could also start to upset the Red Bull a bit and throw a few problems Hadjar's way. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does slip down the order a little bit. He might still score points, but we've seen such a huge sort of lappage difference in Spain alone, where it was also very hot, that we might see that happen again. And Racing Bulls are just operating at such a high level at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if they sort of bank some really good strategy. They get their drivers into a really useful position, and we just get sort of a Lawson runaway, and he comes home something
Mm.
ridiculous like fourth. I think it'd be quite interesting. So
Fourth works for me.
it's
That works
really
for me
not it's
perfectly.
really not as wild, I think, a set of predictions as we maybe intended, but it'd be great to see
We
them
say
happen.
this now, and none of any of this happens over the
Oh,
weekend, and it's something
yeah.
completely different. But yes,
Double Cadillac podium with Lance Stroll on the top step or something absurd like that with Sergio
let's
Perez.
not be too unreasonable about it.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But that is all still to come. It's been a bit of a condensed preview of the Austrian Grand Prix because it's too hot for me to do anything else. That's
And
what
sometimes there isn't much news.
so, yeah, sometimes
Just
there
happens.
just isn't news. I mean, we could talk about Keir Starmer resigning, we could talk about the World Cup, but that's not Formula One, so we're not going to. Anyway, we'll focus on the things we do understand, which is cars going in fast circles, and we'll leave you to enjoy the Austrian Grand Prix. We've also got feeder series returning for this. We've got F2 and
F2 and
F3,
F3.
which is always going to be spicy with a lot of cars on a very small track in a lot of heat, with a lot of drivers getting to grips with some tricky chassis. And
Many of
also
which driving in anger.
yes. And importantly, the Red Bull Ring is also hosting a variety of sort of like anniversary celebrations, I think, for the circuit itself and motorsport in general. They have got a lot of interesting cars out running in parade laps. If you're there across the weekend, this is more relative to you, including celebration of Austrian driver Niki Lauda, and they've got a couple of his cars that will be running around. So there's, yeah, just a good spread of cars that are going to be doing celebration laps. So if you're there across the weekend, be trackside for the entire thing. The F2 and F3 are good. There's going to be some great history to be celebrated as well. So have a good one. Stay hydrated, importantly. And in the meantime, Thiemo, where can you be found?
This week on the Curbs IndyCar, looking back at what was a rather bonkers Road America in the end. We've got an actual episode on the Curbs Normal, which will have Anna Checki on this week, and there'll be another about on It's Race Week, looking at the women who were at Pikes Peak, who did quite well for both themselves and in the general rankings too, out of the 72 competitors, all fairly high up there.
Very interesting stuff. Yeah, it seems this season is going to be one that's going to be endlessly frustrating if you're Marcus Armstrong. Despite his strong performances, it's one that's just going to keep ripping that poor boy's heart out. In the meantime, if you want more from me, you can of course pick up the latest issue of Classic Car Weekly. I can't remember what we've got in this one. There's some interesting bits and pieces in it.
Sick cars, I imagine.
Classic cars, yeah, that very true. A celebration of Longbridge. We've got an investigation into the upcoming social media ban for children under 16 in the UK and how that could in fact impact the way that classic cars are perceived by the next generation. And
Really stretching some of these.
we have to get inventive with the news. And there's the Classic Car Weekly podcast. And of course, you can find me on the internet as at Jesse on Cars on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Hopefully, there'll be some content for me. And also, you'll find me this weekend up Mount Snowdon. Again, I'm taking a friend up, though it looks like the weather breaks for the weekend. So instead of being 35 degrees, hot and
You should
sunny,
really be less blasé about where you hide your bodies.
yeah, it's going to be 15 degrees and drizzly, but that's also just North Wales. It's always like that. Otherwise, we'll be back with a review of all the action from the Austrian Grand Prix in fairly short order. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again soon.